quite the day. I understand you had lawmakers, U.S. Secretary of Commerce Gina Raimondo there, Chuck Schumer as well. You're really trying to refocus your branding as well as your expansion plans. Tell us about what you're hoping to do in Malta.
Well, first, it was a really exciting day today. It was a combination of three things. First, we brought CEOs in from around the industry, the entire ecosystem, from semiconductor manufacturing companies, equipment companies, ecosystem partners for design, and so forth, to have a discussion with Senator Schumer and Secretary Raimondo about what we need to do as an industry. And that was the backdrop for us announcing our bold move to add and expand our campus here in Malta, New York.
Expanding it, you want to create, 1,000 new direct high-tech jobs. You want to be focusing on, an investment model of Fab 8. Tell us about your investment model. How is it different? How does it really give returns to the United States in terms of chip manufacturing when so much of it has gone overseas?
Well, I think that's exactly the point. Maybe a little over a decade ago, the U.S. manufactured 37% of the world's semiconductors. Today, it's down to 12%. Even though 48% or so of the demand is generated through U.S. headquartered companies. And so that's the dynamic Washington and the U.S. wants to fix and need to do that in partnership with companies like GF. And I think today marks the beginning of a new economic model that this industry needs to have to fund this type of expansion. Look, our supply shortage is not going away anytime soon. It will get better. But what we're going to try to do as an industry is double in the next 8 to 10 years what took 50 years to grow. And with that requires a different model, a different economic model on partnerships. Now, that means including governments to participate in investments, customers to participate in investments, and that's the only way we're going to make this work. And the demand is there. Demand society needs semiconductors. It needs to continue to become connected, and how we educate future generations of students, and a whole host of applications that are at the core of a $91 trillion world economy.
You already have been expanding. You've been seeing investment in Singapore, Dresden, of course, and Germany. I'm interested in where your expertise lies. What makes you different from the rest of the chip makers out there?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for that question, because it really goes back to where our industry was 15 years ago and where it's evolved to today. 15 years ago, semiconductors was really predominantly about a compute-centric world, to do compute processing. And then with the advent of the smartphone, the industry fundamentally shifted. For all the features that we see in smartphones, we want it everywhere and everything. We call it pervasive deployment of semiconductors to where we are today, where today 30% of the world is about compute-centric type of technologies and the scaling and Moore's law that feeds that. And 70% is about the ubiquitous deployment of semiconductors in almost any device. And what you've seen is this 70% is where we, GF, play a really important role in these feature-rich technologies. Adding embedded memory for security, adding RF for connectivity, and things of that nature.
Tom, I'm interested in what you said a couple of years ago now. You were interested in aiming for a public offering as soon as 2022. There has been an awful lot of reporting that, well, you might well be being bought by another key US player, Intel. What do you make of those reports in the moment?
Well, I'll take the second one first. Look, there's nothing there in that discussion. The market, as a company like GF becomes more and more in the news, we're playing a very important role in the industry. You can expect a lot of speculations to take place, and we just have to deal with that. I think more importantly is where we're heading as a company and as an industry. We talked about 2022. We haven't backed off of that. For us, that type of strategic move is really about when we want access to the public markets, because it'll change the trajectory of the company. So we always have that in our sights as something we want to do. But for now, our focus is to continue to grow our manufacturing footprint globally as well as in the US, and to continue to help solve the problem we have today. Look, every day this industry, the semiconductor industry, is in the news. Yeah. Not for what we do, but what happens when we don't do enough of it. That's the task at hand for companies like GF, is to go fix that first and foremost.
And of course, that's why you get companies potentially wanting to eye you. So can you say that you haven't heard a single thing from Intel in terms of wanting to buy you for $30 billion?
Look, this is all speculation. That's all I'm going to say.
It's untrue.
We have our plans to be a standalone foundry and do our part for the world.
And of course, you're standalone, backed by Mubadala, key sovereign wealth fund. Have they said anything about your trajectory in terms of going public?
Oh, this asset, I think, has become a real star in their portfolio. They were very thought leaders in understanding the role of semiconductors 10, 12 years ago when they entered this space as long-term patient investors. And I think what you're seeing is they're going to start to see this pay off, this visionary view of the semiconductor industry, the role they could play in it as a sovereign fund, and what they have accomplished, right, and what they've done for AMD, and now what they've done for GlobalFoundries.
So they wouldn't be interested in selling you don't think?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
They wouldn't be interested in GF being acquired?
I think they're interested in holding on to GF and make it the most successful company they've ever had in their portfolio.
And when we look at the supply chain issues that we keep on coming up against, whatever industry we look at, it's been affected in some way. You said you're trying to fast forward right now what has taken 50 years to build over the next 5, 10 years. How soon will we stop talking about supply chain issues, do you think?
So fundamentally, I think the big gap we have over the 2022 will close that gap with supply demand. But again, the way I think about it is if we're going to do in 8 to 10 years what this industry took 50 years to do, that's a lot of capacity that has to come online. And I think by and large, we will be chasing supply for the next 5 to 10 years rather than having too much supply for demand. I think it'll get better, but we'll be chasing supply. In fact, that's why we need to make these investments now so we start to close some of that.